glad to be back at it. And today I have Edie here, and I am so excited to dive into today's topics. We are for sure going to dive into the good girl syndrome, which I've been talking about for quite some time. And so many of you I know are resonating with this syndrome, if we could call it, and just this old way of being that we're ready to shed,
Mm,
and what it is to live in true abundance
yeah,
of creativity, of our
yeah.
purpose, of our
Mm,
womanhood, even from a spiritual, scriptural perspective. So
yeah,
these
yeah,
are so glad that you are here. Please tell
yeah.
us more
Thank
about you. Like, who are you? Where you're from?
you.
What are you doing? And what it is that you're offering to the world? Because we all need to
Yeah.
know it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for this conversation. And yes, yes, yes. So many good things. Everything that you said just resonates so deeply. And so my name is Edie. I help recovering good girls move out from dogma into bliss. And so a lot of the work that I do is around helping us restructure our understanding of scripture, of Christ, of the kingdom, to allow ourselves to even believe that we can access bliss and that we deserve and that we should access bliss. And so, right now, that my work expresses its way through one-on-one coaching, a community I've just started, and some teachings online, sermons, if you want to call them, and get real churchy about it, just to equip women with an understanding that the kingdom is about bliss, the kingdom is about restoration. And so, and oftentimes we've gotten it twisted and think it's something so different. And I know we'll get into that. So that's what I'm all about. And I'm based in Indianapolis, Indiana. It is winter right now. It is cold. I'm cozy, and I love it. So I'm so glad to be here.
Love it. Love everything that you just said. And yes, it's full on winter here as well in Finland. Like, it's
I
proper
bet.
cold and we have lots of snow, and I am just so stoked. Like, I was just thinking out loud today, like, I am so more at home during winter for whatever
Mm,
reason. Probably because
okay.
obviously I've been living here my entire life. But
Right.
anyway, for me, like, snow is the epitome of abundance. And I
Mm,
just,
okay.
I just want to tell you, like, this is not related to what we're going to talk about. Don't worry. We're going to dive into the topics. But I just wanted to share, like, how beautiful it is in the, like, dead heart of the winter,
Mm.
and it's like minus 15 degrees. I don't know what that is in
Ooh,
Fahrenheit. That's like proper, like,
cold.
really, really frosty. Okay. And even the trees are sparkling with frost.
Yeah. Huh.
It looks like
Yeah.
diamonds. It looks like
Mm,
they're just enveloped and covered with diamonds and crystals. And I think that's just, it looks so beautiful. And I'm just in awe every time. And I'm like,
mm,
God, this beauty is part of the bliss that we get to
mm.
receive. But
I love
anyway,
that.
enough of weather. Let's jump into what we're actually going to talk about. So, we've been connecting before this, and I know a
Yeah.
bit of your story already, but I'd like my listeners to know what sparked this change. What
Yeah.
sparked the whole brand that you are now cultivating and creating and planting seeds around? Garden Restored. Like,
Yeah.
where did this come from? Like, why this work around identity as a
Yeah.
woman?
Yeah. Thank you so much. So I grew up in church, um, great family, not dogmatic and strict, but a real pivotal experience I had was in college and being a part of a group that by all characterizations, I would say is a cult, was a cult. It's no longer functioning as it was previously. And I left that experience very disoriented, very fragmented, and just with so much internal turmoil. And I didn't even fully realize it. It took me years, and I'm still uncovering things from that time. But the aftermath of that was me really living out a spirituality and a faith that was very dogmatic, very fundamentalist, very Pharisaical. And while I was externalizing this judgment on others, while I was pointing the finger at others, I was pointing so much more anger and hatred towards myself. And so on my profile, I say I have like suicidal Pharisee to radiant co-heir, because that's really been my journey. And it's something I want to highlight as well, is that it can be so easy to see people who are angry and seem bigoted, and to just completely dehumanize them, as they are often doing, but realizing that all that anger and that spite is probably pointed towards themselves 100 times. So anyways, that's the space I was existing in. But I really, things began to really crumble once I got married, started having kids, and I could not continue the running around, the trying to be perfect. And I'm sure your listeners completely resonate with that. And on top of this, I was seeing more and more instances within the church of abuse, things that have come out, stories, and also seeing conversations and scripture being interpreted in a way that, even if the person who was utilizing the scripture was not necessarily abusive or abusing somebody directly, it was an easy and quick jump, hop, and skip to abusive situations and co-signing. And so I have this whole melting pot going on, and the kind of the moment that broke down the wall was after watching Shiny Happy People. And I'll say before that, I've been engaging with different content, yours included. Like, I've been a follower closer to the beginning of your podcast before I even started a business, and just seeing examples of women in their radiance, seeing examples of women who are like, oh, we're missing the context of the scripture, and women just speaking up about these things, and not even just directly, but also just being examples of what life in bliss looks like. And so then I watched Shiny Happy People, and I remember that night just overwhelmed. And I was just like, Jesus, if this is your lot, like, I can't do this anymore. If you are asking me to live 80 years of hell to try and get to heaven, I can't do it. And I was so scared, questioning the foundation of my life. But that moment set off just a beautiful journey, and really allowed me to see, one, that there are people who have wrestled with their spirituality and have come to understand the beauty and the love and the abundance available in the kingdom, and that the one way I had been taught and portrayed to walk out my faith is not the only way. And you're not wrong or bad for engaging with Jesus in different ways. And in fact, that's how he operates. He created us all uniquely. And so out of all of that, and also getting my own coach and having that be just a tremendously powerful experience. I've been in therapy for many years on and off, but getting a coach who really held that vision for the future just blew the lid off my life. With all that, I realized that this is what I wanted to do with my life, is to also be a beacon, and spend as much time of my life as I can telling women that you have a deep identity, you have agency that is grounded in Christ, and He came, in fact, to free us from pain, from separation, from strife, from this inner critic, from this the leaven of the Pharisee. And so that's how I ended up where I am today and what I'm doing. And with Garden Restored, that really comes from, that was a direct God thing. I actually like wrestled against it. I was Garden Restored, then I switched to something else I felt sounded cooler, and it just was misaligned. And I was like, fine, but it's good. I love it. And I really just eased into it. But Garden Restored comes from the idea of like the Garden of Eden, and the idea of restoration in the here and now. Again, going back to that, my cry and literally in the midnight hour of living a terrible life here in hopes for heaven. But so Garden Restored speaks the idea of the idea that we're supposed to bring heaven right now. Like, we're not supposed to just like follow a bunch of rules, be all like weird and fragmented, and then die and then experience, no crying and restoration of our bodies and peace. But like, we're seeking to usher that in now. The work begins now. And so Garden Restored was the Garden of Eden restored, in our internally, within first and then without. So yeah, that's really my kind of origin story, my not villain arc, but whatever kids say these days. But yeah, that's how I got my start.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing
Thank you.
that. And
Yeah.
I think for me as well, because my journey in many ways resembles yours, and there's just
Mm.
been, of course, it's different, but in many ways, it
Yeah.
does resemble the sort of unraveling of
Mm.
old this mumble of yarn that just I've been carrying around, and
Yeah.
I don't even understand fully
Mm. Yeah.
being true, being just so, because I know for myself and for many of my listeners who are just so very diligent
Mm.
at
Yeah.
listening to authorities.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
this is not me bashing or saying
Yeah.
that we shouldn't have leadership in our
Right.
lives present.
Yes.
Absolutely not. There's a place for leadership, and there
Yeah.
is rightful authority also. But so much of what we witness these days is somehow distorted.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's hard to reconcile sometimes that we've been deep in the depths of it without even realizing it.
Yeah.
Because just what we know about the human mind, we just like certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what
Yes.
the human mind wrestles with and gravitates toward: certainty. We
Yeah.
like certainty, and if a certain way of rigidity brings us that sense of certainty,
Yeah.
even if it's false at the core of
Right.
it, even if we wrestle with
Yeah.
anxiety most days, or fragmented
Mm.
relationships, or
Yeah.
strife at home,
Yeah.
we still gravitate and sort of latch onto that certainty that
Right.
a certain rigidity grants us. And I find it just so fascinating how painful it can be to let go of
Mm.
that,
Yeah.
even though the peace that was promised in scripture
Mm.
is on the other
Exactly.
side of letting
Exactly.
go of a false sense of security, a false
Yeah.
sense of certainty that
Yeah.
we sort of create with our analytical, logical mind
Right.
by following a set of rules.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, what for you was the first pivotal experience where you felt bliss?
Mm. Yeah. I love that. Thanks for that question. Um, and it's almost hard to pinpoint because for me it was a slow creeping up. Okay, let me think. I think yeah, it was a slow creeping up, but when you asked, I'm like, okay, I think the moment, and this is really fresh, but I think the moment that I felt true bliss um, was so our my marriage had been rocky, and not because my husband isn't an amazing man. We both have our own things, but on my part, I was stuck in that good girl syndrome. I was stuck not vocalizing and not setting the boundaries and uh, maintaining the repercussions for that boundary being broken
Yeah. Yeah.
and seeking to manage all the emotions in the relationship. I'll shove my emotions down and I'll amplify them here and I'll do all that. So, anyways, so it's been rocky, but then as I was on this journey, I reached the point where I was like, I can't keep doing this. And if nothing changes, I will not remain. Not because you're hitting me, not because you're cheating on me, but I mean, there's a whole story there. And I want to be clear, it's not about this doesn't feel good anymore, so I'm leaving. But also for me, understanding, um, I don't know, I don't. This was not what we're planning to get into. I don't know, but like
No, no, no.
understanding when
Go
Jesus,
ahead. Go ahead. Jump right into it. We're here
yeah,
for the
one.
realness.
Okay, okay. And I'm not saying I'm a theologian or you should follow this, but what I realized, uh, so it reached a point where I had tried everything and nothing seemed to be working. We went to therapy, we did this, we did that, etc. And so it reached a point where I'm like, am I going to, again, live 80 years of strife with, can I remain in this as it is and live 80 years like this? And the answer for me was no. And I, there was so much prayer and struggle in it. And something for me that was so freeing was understanding the word divorce that Jesus used, sending away. Funny enough, he actually woke me up this morning to read that. But the sending away that Jesus talks about, that fragmentation, that fracture in relationship, is not about a legal document. It's about the dissolution of the covenant. When we come together in marriage, we say, I am honoring you, I'm cherishing you, I am showing up, I am putting in the work, right? And the divorce occurs when one partner decides to no longer do that. When they say, I tap out, I'm not doing that, whether or not the paper has been signed. And that's the point I felt I was at. And so that was a whole long-winded setup to say the moment that I think maybe I noticed the bliss and really experienced it was when I realized that when I still felt peace thinking about everything ending and the fallout and the struggle and the seeking to parent in the midst of this and all of that, when I realized that I fully believed that there was good on the other side, um, and good on the other side of vocalizing that I cannot do this anymore, if that makes sense. I didn't leave. We're still married, and yeah, that's a whole nother story. A beautiful restoration. But yeah, coming face to face with my good girl syndrome, which said, you cannot leave. Even if you're depressed, stressed, and anxious, and there is no movement on the other party's side, you must stay, right? And I came face to face with good girl Edie and said, this is not what we were created for. We cannot remain here. And externalizing that and understanding that I will be okay, and feeling the bliss of knowing that this is not all my life was meant for. My life was not just meant for a mediocre relationship and pain and swallowing my emotions. And so I would say that was a huge one for me. And the beautiful, amazing thing I want to highlight is on the other side of that is the marriage I always wanted. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
we are so scared of falling out of line. We are so scared of not remaining within these rigid lines, not realizing, like you said, that peace and that abundance and that fullness we desire is on the other side. And yeah, I there's like two thoughts that are popping in my mind, but I don't want to derail our conversation. Yeah,
Oh, that was so good. I mean, what I'm getting from that is like the permission that you gave yourself in that
yeah,
moment to break down, essentially. That there was a point of breaking down, and you saw in that moment that I could still be fine. I could
hmm,
still, see life after this. And
yeah,
when you allowed yourself to not hold on to the self manufactured certainty, again, to use that
mm,
word,
yeah,
of the good girl syndrome,
right,
that allowed you to step into the marriage that
yeah,
you now have, which is
right,
different, as I understand it. The,
so
the
different.
restoration
Yeah,
happened afterwards, after
hmm,
you
hmm,
realized that the good girl syndrome was actually holding you back. It
exactly,
was holding your marriage back,
right,
and
exactly,
disallowing the restoration from happening.
exactly,
And that is huge
yeah.
because I have a huge heart for wives who are
Yes,
struggling,
yes, yes,
because
yes.
we've both been there.
Yeah.
And the sort of the feeling of being lost and
Mm,
trying to fix it
right.
from the
Yep.
mind, just doing
Yeah.
all the things,
Yep.
and the utter frustration of it when it doesn't work,
Yeah.
and that state of just not being whole.
Hmm.
um I see it so often. It's almost as if it's being glorified in a subtle,
Mm,
implicit way, to say that this is what loyalty looks like, for you
Right.
to live a dry life.
Ugh, God.
But
Yeah.
we are here both to say that that is not the
No.
case.
Yes, please. Yes.
And yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there, but I'm
Yes,
curious
yes,
to hear
yes.
like what was coming up for you. Just a moment ago, you mentioned two things.
Yeah, yeah. So the two thoughts that are coming to mind are the whole concept of carrying our cross, which kind of ties into that ride or die kind of, and then the concept of spirit and truth. So I'll start with the carrying your cross. 'Cause I think it weaves in, and I'm actually preparing to do a post about this. But um, when we think about carrying our cross, at least when I have been talked about, when it has been talked about to me, it often is kind of the response when you're going through something hard, right? And something that people think you should remain in. And your marriage is on the rocks. Carry your cross, sister. Just pray and keep on managing the emotions and like gentle parenting your husband, and also, not respecting that he is a grown man who can handle these conversations. Like just keep doing that. Like, you're running ragged, you're tired, you're volunteering, you're doing this, this is me carrying my cross, etc. But when we look at Jesus's words and what he challenged people with, what he talked to them about, one of the biggest fundamental and foundational things that came up was this whole concept of spirit and in truth. And he mentioned it once, I believe, but not explicitly in all these situations. But the whole concept of looking underneath the tangible and acknowledging what is truly present. And so like with spirit, we can think about how people say we're spirits having a physical experience, whatever, but understanding that some of the hardest work we can do is to look beneath the surface, look under the hood, look um, underneath our externalities and our externalizing, and see what is truly within us, what is within my soul, what is in my spirit, and slowing down to do that work. And the truth kind of ties into that as well, understanding not just the truth of what we believe we should believe, but the truth of what we actually believe. Like that is one of the most painful works to do, is to again come face to face with what you actually believe. um, and you may say, yes, I believe Jesus' yoke is easy, his burden is light. That's what the scripture says. But when you look at your life, when you come face to face with your truth, it may truly be that you believe that following Christ is hard and you're doing penance all throughout your life. You know what I'm saying? And so I encourage us, when we get into the headspace of, okay, I'm doing my Christianly duty, or what have you want to say, I'm carrying my cross, instead of interpreting it as let me do all these actions that bring me pain, and continue to do things that bring me pain, let me carry my cross in self-reflection, let me carry my cross of stillness, let me carry my cross of allowing Jesus to peel back and show me what I actually believe,
Yeah.
uh, underneath what I should believe and think but and what people tell me to believe, but what do I actually believe,
Mm.
and carry the cross of allowing Jesus to alchemize all these different fragmented pieces of myself. And so that was what was coming up for me, like in my relationship. What I for it to thrive, I had to come face to face with the spirit of truth of that matter. I had to carry my cross and put to death the old self, which was the good girl syndrome in this situation. Not my personality, not my likes and dislikes, not comfort. Comfort isn't the right word. Not my well-being, but
Yeah.
this part of myself that I had attached myself to so tightly that was actually harming me, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I've been discussing this also and thinking about this a lot, and I think I did an episode like self care on spiritual or something like that, where I
Mm,
sort of tossed around the scriptures also, and really reflected on those, and just saw with more clarity than ever how we take those scriptures and we create this self-induced,
mm,
self-produced suffering
yeah.
because that's just something that, that's what we believe is part of the deal.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's unconscious. It's not like,
Yeah.
oh, today I'm going to
Right.
produce a lot of suffering for myself. Woohoo. No, it's obviously not. Because it's very much unconscious. It is a culturization that has happened or
Mm,
occurred around certain scriptures where we don't
yeah.
even actually understand anymore
Right.
what they
Yeah.
mean or what they are speaking to, whether it is because they are translations that we look at or because of the church culture and empire at large that has
Right.
hijacked the true meaning and then used
Yeah.
it for power. But yeah, it's just we women especially, I find that this
Yeah.
is a conversation necessary for women specifically
Yeah.
because of our biological wiring and our
Mm,
strengths, also the fact that we are more sensitive in many
mm,
ways,
yeah.
and how we're both socialized but also biologically
Yeah.
wired to look for approval
Mm,
first for the sake of safety,
yeah.
as like if we're thinking of living in a tribe or something like that, if we're living in a community.
Right.
And a tribe you can now think of as a church community, for example, and you
Right.
are so
Right.
afraid of being cast out
Yep.
that the nervous system and the brain is like, don't do these things because we can't survive
Yeah.
outside
Yeah. Yeah.
this paradigm.
Yeah.
And that is very much unconscious. It's not something that we think about um,
Yeah.
purposely, but yeah, it's the self-produced suffering
Mm.
for the sake of sanctifying yourself in some
Mm.
way.
Yeah.
Is It's been a huge topic for me personally, and my husband
Mm.
still keeps reminding me, like, if something slips out of my mouth
Mm.
that is still like echoing that sentiment or
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
belief that, oh, woe is me, or oh, well, I don't need something, I don't need that, I can just manage without,
Yeah.
and or anything that resembles that sort of, oh, I'm contracting and
Yeah.
I'm collapsing. I refuse to receive more because
Mm.
I believe somewhere deep down and inside my mind that if I just deny myself
Mm.
something good, that is pleasing
Yeah.
to God.
That's it right there. Yeah.
And I'm really glad that my husband is on board with this, and he's
Yeah.
like,
That's
yeah,
beautiful.
look at you, like, okay, well, what did you just say? Like, and reminding me, like, okay, you don't want to sound like your grandmother, Joe, like, because there are, like, I've had these beautiful, like, I
Yeah.
love all of my family members, but
Yes.
they also show me some of the fragmentation
Yeah.
around these things and some of the things that I definitely don't want to become or model or embody. and
Yeah.
and it's great that we have
Right.
people in our lives who are also like showing to us, mirroring to us, like, okay,
Yeah.
girl, you're doing it here.
Right.
Did you
I love
notice
that.
that
Mm-hmm.
when the subconscious thought patterns just prop up, because it's not a,
Right.
you know over the night shift. It's a process of
Mm. Right.
unlearning the old self
Yeah.
and letting it die so that
Yeah.
the proverbial the death process, like the old
Mm-hmm.
self, your ego, your limitations, your
Right.
good girl syndrome, your people pleasing tendencies, all of these are part of the flesh that needs
Yeah.
to die. The flesh is not your needs for
Right.
nourishment and nutrients and
Yes.
your need for rest
Yeah.
and your need for fulfillment and your
Yeah.
calling to to just shine and blossom here. That's not the
Yeah.
flesh. The flesh
Right.
is actually, if we realize it, it's exactly what we don't want to experience. The
Yeah.
people pleasing, all of it.
Right.
Sorry, I went on a
Yeah.
tangent there.
No, that was so beautiful. And I just want to say real fast as well, because what you're saying exactly. And just a little cherry on top with what you just said, what you're describing is heaven, right? When we're free of the good girl syndrome, we're free of all these limiting things. And I just want to put that bow on it and say to all the listeners, like, just a little thought exercise again. When we think of heaven, we think of perfection, we think of beauty, right? We think of abundance. I mean, the streets are paved with gold, like,
Yeah.
whether literally or whatever, and somehow we have lost the realization that that's the goal, right? So why would we not think that Jesus wants that for us now? You know what I'm saying? And
Mm.
so I just want to echo what you're saying, and like, that's the journey to heaven begins today. And it's not like you're paying penance and proving your worth to
Mm.
have a good eternity right now. That's exactly, that's what we believe. If you follow Christ, you believe that he bridged all that separation and is ushering that in for us. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I just want to echo what you're saying, that
Yeah.
yes, it is required. There's a verse that says God requires that we believe that he blesses those who seek after him. It's a requirement. It's a
Mm.
requirement to believe that abundance and bliss is available to you. So just hold on to that. Like, you're worth it. You deserve it. This is what God has in store for you.
Yes. My goodness. And with all of this, I just want to remind that we're not denying the reality of us going
Yeah.
through painful things
Yes, definitely.
and
Yeah.
and real life circumstances that are painful in the way they shed the old
Mm,
layers of us
yeah.
and actually do, in a way, they do sanctify us. But that
Mm,
has nothing to do with the ego driving the whole
mm,
process. Like, it cannot, it actually, those are at odds. If your ego is at the on the driver's seat, um, of an experience, that means that you have hijacked a process that could actually produce beautiful fruit
mm, yeah.
and restoration in your life.
Right.
So that is what is happening. Is like when a wife is like, well, this dry marriage where I'm mothering him and I'm disrespecting him, whether I realize it or not. And there's
Yeah.
no chemistry, no sexual polarity, none of it anymore. It's just, my lot to bear.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And I'm secretly so proud of myself
Hmm.
for being the good wife.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I refuse to look at myself in the mirror and see
Mm,
what it is that I'm holding on to that is keeping me from true intimacy, from true
mm,
bliss
yeah.
happening inside this marriage, just as an example. So, yeah.
Not personal at all. Right.
Yes,
Just made
random,
up.
random
Right.
miscellaneous.
I've never experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, Edie, what does bliss look like in terms of your calling as a woman? I'm
Mm,
really curious to hear more about that and how you've experienced this.
mm,
For those who are listening and are just playing with the idea that whatever they do professionally, or if they decide to stay at home, or
yeah.
whatever they decide to dedicate most of their time to, let's just say, that it could combine true
Yeah.
service
Yeah.
and pleasure.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
they're sort of almost allowing themselves to believe that it's possible for them, but past
Yeah.
experiences tell otherwise. What would you say
Right.
to a woman who is struggling with that?
Yeah. That's good. So I will say that important step is just that mustard seed of belief, right? I believe, help my unbelief kind of thing. Obviously, we're the beautiful thing about not self-sourcing and that we're connected to infinite abundance is that we don't need to have our mindset completely right and be completely aligned to have what our hearts are yearning for, or wondering about. But there is some level of that mustard seed of faith to believe that God truly wants this for you. Because once you have that mustard seed of faith, then your eyes start opening to opportunities that have been in front of you. You know, you start showing up into meetings at work, and words that you wouldn't have even thought about it, because you would have been so frustrated, so tired, so certain about how your life has to look. Now, as people are saying things, you're like, oh, this is an opportunity, or this, and you get these divine sparks and you're receptive. It's almost like, I often compare like God speaking to us, like we're like the receiving walkie-talkie to his radio signal, and now you've like turned it even more closely in this area to his frequency, and so now you're able to receive what has already been he's been saying and been showing to you. And so for the woman who's feeling that, and who may be struggling with believing that one, God even wants this for her, I encourage you to, if you follow Christ, to read some of his words. Even if you don't follow Christ, you might enjoy his words as well. But there's a beautiful resource that maybe we can link. It's 99 cents on Amazon, or there's a free ebook or free PDF floating on the interwebs. But it's literally just the words of Jesus. And when you read just his words, there is something so clarifying and purifying, because it forces you to kind of just remove some of the extras that we've placed around, because now you're reading things without, and it's in chronological order, so you're seeing the narrative, and you realize that the kingdom of heaven is like, and all those it's about restoration and returning home. It's about bringing heaven on earth, like the beatitudes where blessed are, the poor in spirit, blessed are the, it's not saying blessed so try and be poor, try and be persecuted. It's saying blessed are you because the remedy for these ailments and afflictions is now here. And so just because the ministry I do, that what I would say to a woman in that situation is start by going back to Jesus's words and asking and really seeking to understand his words for what they actually are. Don't get into any commentaries. Don't watch sermons on them. Just hear him speak and trust that he can speak to you, if you're struggling with that. And then in whatever practices and exercises you already have, spiritual practices, whether prayer and meditation, affirmations, etc. I know Johanna has a whole bunch of awesome ones. But start inundating yourself with the idea of bliss as your birthright and bliss as attainable. Surround yourself with content, podcasts like this, where you are it's instead of in your ear is the drum and the drone of this is the grind, this is how life is. Like, surround yourself and start filling yourself up with voices that can counter those voices for you when you don't have the faith. Let us hold faith for you, build up that community. And as you start doing these things, and I mean, really, as you allow Christ to shift your identity and welcome these things in, it just becomes a synergistic snowball where you're getting confirmation. You're like, oh my goodness, I see how you're providing. I see this spark of bliss as I'm typing up this Excel, and like just little things like that become part of your life. And one day you look up months down the road and you realize that your narrative has changed, months, years, weeks, who knows, whatever your timeline looks like. So to summarize, because that was all over, I highly recommend re-examining Jesus' words for what he actually said. Leave the commentary behind, and then surround yourself with other women, other people who can hold the faith for you, even if we don't know you directly, but like just the podcast, the content, etc. And allow Christ light to begin to plant that mustard seed of faith that this is available. And in fact, he requires that you desire and believe that this bliss and abundance is headed your way.
So good. We're definitely going to put that book in the link or the description below. I also need to get it and have that as a resource. It's I don't know why haven't even looked up for that yet. It hasn't occurred to me that there's one where it's just only his words. But anyway, love that. For the girl who is struggling or grappling with
Mm.
the idea that her desires are good, that they
Mm.
are rightful, that they are righteous.
Yeah.
Because this is what comes up a lot with the women that I talk to.
Yeah.
Is that how do I know that I can trust my desires?
Yeah.
How, like, when do I know, like, if it's just, if it is from my flesh, so to speak,
Right.
it, or
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
it is something that God has planted in my heart, like the dutiful girl
Yeah.
who wants to do the right thing, who wants to please. She's usually the one who is grappling with this question
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
seeing the value and the goodness and the rightness of her deepest desires. But what would
Mm-hmm.
you tell her from your perspective if she's like,
Yeah.
well, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I can allow myself to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I have been that woman, still working through that woman, I know that there are certain passages of scriptures that we hold so tightly. The heart is deceitfully wicked above all else. Who can understand it? I know that was one that just thrown at me all the time. And Romans, like we've all fallen short and stuff. But I think one of the first places to start is really to understand that, let's see. So God speaks through our desires, and perhaps saying that is not enough. And this for me is why, in interacting with the scriptures in spirit and in truth is so important. So for the woman who is hung up on the scripture, I will say, first and foremost, that um, one, if you look at the Romans passage, I don't remember exactly what it is. I actually have a post just about this, that maybe I'll hand over to you as well. But there's a passage in Romans about falling short, or our flesh. I can't remember exactly which one, but the verse right after is that if we are in the spirit, like this does not apply to us anymore. And understanding that God has created all of us with a desire to be reconnected with Him, to be connected, to be reconnected, however you want to think about that. And He speaks to us in so many different channels, and one of those being our desires. And I like to differentiate macro desires versus micro desires. Like, I want ice cream, a micro desire. Your body's probably telling you something, and if it's something you probably shouldn't be eating, your body's probably missing something, but I'm sure that's a whole other subject.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have a podcast episode on that. But these macro desires of, I want to live in this neighborhood. I want my house to be like this. I want my home life to look like this. I want people to experience freedom like this. I want this kind of life for myself. These macro desires are beautiful signposts for us. So let's say, even if we can't say that your desire is 100% something that's going to be fulfilled and that should be fulfilled, let's take that first step and say we don't need to be afraid of them. At least remember, spirit and in truth, they're there whether or not we want to acknowledge them. And the funny thing about us as humans, and funny and beautiful thing, is that we can't alchemize what we don't recognize. And if we shove something down, it's just going to come out sideways and in ways that we would rather not that it do. So the most helpful thing you can do for yourself is to at least examine these desires, turn them around in your hand and in your mind, sit with them, and and begin to have a conversation, not starting from the place of should I have this desire, but I have this desire. What is it telling me? Because maybe it's not something you actually desire. Maybe it's pointing to something deeper. Maybe it is a desire that can be fulfilled and is calling you forward. But the first step is really allowing yourself to understand that desires are not going away. Just assume it. It's not going away. So I need to look at it. I need to talk to it. It's like somebody knocking on your door and they're like, "Hey, let's have a conversation." You're not going to just hide out in your room for the rest of your life so that you don't have to talk to that person knocking, right? You open the door. What do you want? You want to sell me something? I don't want it. No, thank you. Oh, you have something interesting? Oh, I know you. Come inside. Let's talk some more. So the big thing is first to just honor them, and understand that that's very biblical. It's very scriptural. operating in spirit and in truth and getting beneath the surface and acknowledging. Because I may not have said this, but God already knows that, like, he already knows everything inside, even the 95% of our lives that are like subconscious that we don't recognize most of the time. He sees it all. He sees all your programming, all your desires. So this is not about uncovering something that the divine does not already know. It is about allowing the conversation to happen and then allowing the light to come into that area and allowing the discernment, allowing the freedom to come into the area. So whether that desire is one to be fulfilled or one that kind of transmutes and shows you a different path, like, it's God knows it's there and he just desires to talk to you about it.
Yeah, exactly. I love the way you said it and explained it. And it's like you're digging for gold in a mine because that
Mm,
one desire leads to another. And it just
yes.
layer upon layer, you're peeling back the layers of an onion,
Yeah.
and you'll find the core of that desire. So sometimes if it's a like a specific thing, or I don't want to say superficial, but more superficial
Yeah.
than the core idea. You have to do the work to see, okay, what
Yeah.
it is about, what it is that you actually want to do, like what it is that you value most in life, where you
Yeah.
would feel most aligned and
Yeah.
most fulfilled. Sometimes for me, it's just like I've had this idea that it looks exactly like this, and I'm doing
Right.
exactly this specific thing, and it has changed over time because I've been
Yep.
peeling back the layers of the onion, and
Right.
and started to see, okay, what is the actual core that
Yeah.
was placed in me.
Yeah.
And it cannot happen. We can't allow ourselves the bliss of living that if we
Yeah.
don't, if we're afraid of facing that.
Yeah.
And it's so fascinating how I've been there, and many of my listeners have been there, that there's been actual fear of facing that
Yeah.
if you recognize and acknowledge something in you, that in and
Mm.
of itself is somehow
Yeah.
bad or
Right.
damaging or something like
Yeah.
that, when we come from that ego state, that conditioned
Yeah.
mind. um
Right.
and that's not how it works. Like you said, I love how you
Right.
said it, that it's whether you recognize and acknowledge it or not, it's going to spill sideways if you don't just,
Hmm.
face it head on.
Yeah.
It's not going to disappear, just like, the
Right.
pains of our inner child, and all of those deeper
Mm.
subconscious beliefs. They are there whether we want to face them or
Yep.
not, and they're going to
Yep.
affect our lives whether we want it or not. Yeah, so yeah, I love that. I It's so
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the question of, I want to talk about abundance a little bit more. Abundance
Mm.
and bliss
Yeah.
for the recovering good girl.
Yeah.
What does abundance and bliss look like and feel
Yeah.
like? Sometimes,
Yeah.
because the way I want to approach this is demystify it. When
Yeah.
we
Yep.
throw those words around, they are
Yep.
so like grand and so just, out there, ethereal concepts floating above the clouds. And we're like,
Yes.
yes, but what about my gritty life? um, so
Right.
how do we marry those two? Like, where do we meet the bliss? Where do we
Yeah.
see and experience the abundance? Because we're not just talking about like having, I don't know, just tons and tons of money. Not that there's
Right.
anything wrong with that. There's definitely
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But that's not
Yeah.
the full extent of abundance or
No.
prosperity.
Right.
What it is? What is it for you in your life, in the micro moments and the macro
Yeah.
themes of your life?
Yeah. Yes, this is such an important thing to talk about, right? Because it's not just a marketing buzzword. Like, I know you and what you do, and likewise for me, like, we mean these words. And so for me, so bliss is primarily, I almost entirely internal. it's an internal equilibrium. It's almost like raising your resting heart rate, but it's or I think the good for your heart rate, it's actually good to lower it. But in this case, it's like raising your resting. I don't know. I have to think of a snappy word to say that, but moving from so there'll be highs and there'll be lows,
Mm.
but where do you come back at center? And
The
for me,
resonance,
bliss,
sort of,
resonance, yeah,
or
yeah, 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 yeah.
frequency. I don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, exactly. I was gonna say it's kind of like resting vibration. I know that's kind of a loaded word, and there's a lot of stuff around that. But like,
I know.
really,
Yeah.
it's where do you come back to, and raising this level, in the highs and lows, coming back to security, coming back to receptivity, coming back to attunement to yourself. And really, for me, I mean, bliss boils down to uh, deep connection with self, God, and others. Um, and so this whole idea of spirit and truth, and for me, bliss is about removing or more deeply integrating the truth of who I am, more deeply integrating the truth of who God is, and more deeply integrating and holding the space for the truth of who people are. And so that's why, for me, bliss is largely internal. And as life goes, when we are at this higher resting frequency, when we're in this space of being intertwined with God, being integrated inside, our external lives often begin to mirror and mimic it. Life, things, people, opportunities just cannot help but be drawn to a grounded, radiant woman, person, but woman we're
Mm.
speaking about. And so in the day to day, that's what it looks like to me. Just a deep gratitude and understanding of my complete provision, my nakedness before myself and God. And then in the macro, I do believe it's glory to glory. Like the trajectory of my 6 months ago is even faster, even steeper curve than uh the 6 months before that, and there are hills and valleys in it, but it's also this glory to glory journey. And again, the glory to glory of, oh, I'm knowing myself more deeply. I'm showing up in more power and more radiance. Oh, I know Jesus even more deeply. Like the light of Christ is shining in me even more deeply. And yes, and then my relationships are mirroring that, but understanding like that order of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
What is it for you?
I love that. I love everything you said. Yeah, I totally agree with everything. Just it's bliss isn't like you said, it's an internal state of being, and so is
Yeah.
abundance.
Yeah.
It's not something that we sort of hold an expectation. For example, I'll feel abundant and blissful when this person sends
Yeah.
me a message, or I'll
Right.
I'll experience it when my husband does this to me
Yep.
or for me, or when I get this client, I'll be feeling abundant. So all of this
Right.
is just or are examples of being codependent on something
Hmm.
that you are trying with your internal work to
Right.
micromanage and control from the from the
Yes.
ethers and be like, woo, you come to me. And it's just um and it's just wasted energy, in the sense that
Yeah.
if we are in a state of
Mm.
I will find bliss and abundance once something
Hmm.
externally happens, we're always
Right.
keeping it at a distance from
Yeah.
ourselves. And that has been such a journey for me personally
Yeah. I hear
to
you.
really realize that. And allow myself to disentangle from
Mm.
just from the heaviness of
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
because it's so easy from like, I love like self development, everything. I
Right.
was drawn to these things when I was like a high schooler, and I started to read all the books and consume all the podcasts. But
Yeah.
I was also operating very much in that fragmented ego state and in a very masculine paradigm at the
Yeah.
time. So it was very easy to start seeing it. Okay, it's something external, something that I need to acquire, rather than something that I get to cultivate within.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
so, and even to this day, I need to remind myself of the fact
Yeah. Yeah. I
that
hear you.
my provision and my fulfillment, my bliss, my abundance is not dependent on something going according to plan, exactly like, okay, I'm going to
Right.
get this and this person are going to be my clients, and then,
Yeah.
you know, and this is how things are turning out, or I'm going to get that job, and if I can't get that job and they say no, then I'm going to be screwed.
Right.
Or if this
Yeah.
person I'm dating right now, this man is just, if I'm not getting from them what I need, like I don't know what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do with myself. Like I thought, like
Mm.
we are giving the keys of our
Yes.
heaven or of our
Kingdom.
happiness
Yes.
to other people and circumstantial things that
Yeah.
we can't control. So just wanted to remind everyone listening that it's
Yes.
easy to go that route, but we
Yes.
get to stop ourselves and be, just bring that level of self-awareness there, and realize that that's not what bliss and abundance is about. And for
Yes.
me, they are
Yes.
found in the simplest of things, like I've mentioned many times on this
Mm.
podcast. Like, snow outside for me is just, it is bliss, it is abundance for
Yeah.
me. A
Oh, I
cup
love
of
it.
steaming hot cocoa is bliss
Mm.
and abundance for me. When I get to do, be present with my body and do some,
Mm.
slow, nourishing, juicy breathing, that's
Mm.
that's bliss and abundance for me. And when
Yeah.
I get to hug and kiss my husband, that is
Oh,
bliss and
yeah.
abundance.
Mm.
And so it's in the micro moments, but it's also the
Yeah.
macro in the sense that it gets to be the overall theme of
Yeah.
everything I do.
Mm.
And can I actually accept that? Can I actually receive that? Everything I do, all, whether it's a podcast or coaching or music, or I have, like I mentioned in the beginning, like I have a part-time job currently, and it doesn't matter what I do, mothering,
Yeah.
of being a mother, not mothering my
Yeah.
man, but being a
Right.
mother,
We don't do that
um
here. Yeah.
which is going to happen next spring for me.
Yay.
It's it gets to be the overarching theme
Yeah.
present in everything, but it
Yeah.
needs to be cultivated within. I need to
Right.
see first and truly claim
Mm.
my right to
Yes. Yes.
experience it,
Yeah.
because no one can keep, like, I am the one keeping myself from it, no one else.
Exactly. Exactly.
Ooh, this has been good. Went on a tangent there again, but you asked
It
the
was
question.
beautiful. It was right. Now I was like, give us more. I love it.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I had one more question that I wanted to ask, just, related to that.
Yeah.
For the woman who is currently struggling,
Mm.
like deeply
Mm.
not satisfied with
Yeah.
something, whether it's a painful situation in a relationship, the pain of not having a relationship, or dealing with loss, dealing with losing a job, dealing with
Yeah.
financial worry and
Mm.
turmoil. How can she allow herself still to believe that bliss and abundance are hers to claim.
Yeah. So this, let's see. So obviously, I don't know everyone who is listening. I don't know your story, but I want to submit to you that you are more powerful, far more powerful than you realize. And that in the scary and ego destroying work of stepping into your kingdom co-heirship, you will be able to discover your bliss. So I think that at least in my life and with a lot of the women I've interacted with, the biggest blockage of bliss is exactly what you talked about, is this whole is the idea that somebody else holds the keys to bliss. We are seeking to self-source, which is on the whole other side of the spectrum. It's still externalizing, right? Because it's like, I'm going to make myself presentable inside. I'm going to have this mindset and do all this manifestation stuff to bring these external things that will then validate this. So no matter, even if it looks like you are, hustling and doing all that stuff, or whether you are actively pursuing things to kind of try and bring the bliss, I want to submit to you that the power lies within bliss lies in being able to believe that God has given you what you need to experience bliss within. It doesn't mean it will be easy or simple. It doesn't mean that there won't be tears shed and relationships severed or hard decisions made or externally very much non-blissful liminal seasons. But once you believe that bliss can be found, even if you don't feel like you're experiencing it now and it feels unattainable, like what we talked about, I believe, help my unbelief. You have this little mustard seed of faith. Then can you sit in stillness and come into agreement that you are far more powerful and have so much more say over your life than you have given yourself credit? That yes, these people may have done these things to you, but your unforgiveness is what's keeping you bound energetically to them. Like, yes, this company perhaps is not using you to the fullest of your abilities. And who has been the good girl who hasn't spoken up in the meetings when people have stolen her ideas? Yes, this marriage is sucking the life out of you. And we're not talking about cases of abuse. We're not talking about cases of clear negligence. If you have a safe man, right? Safe, mature to a certain point man, right? If you have a safe man. If you don't have a safe man, get safe first before you even, but anyways, the marriage that's dissatisfying, like we've talked about so much, like, can we acknowledge as well where we have blocked our bliss because we are too scared to acknowledge that we have not set boundaries, too scared to acknowledge that we are seeking to control him and his behavior and overriding his sovereignty. And so I would say that your bliss oftentimes lies in the crucible of becoming radically aware of how you have contributed to your own life. And it's not a bro, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You suck. You did this to yourself. But like, you have power. You are a creatrix. God has given you that power. And we love every version of ourselves that has gotten us here. Every version of yourself has kept you alive. We honor her. We thank her. And she is no longer serving us. So now it's time to look in the mirror and do that deep, sometimes hard work, but the work that's so necessary if we want to step into our bliss.
Yeah, exactly. So good. So good. Surrendering that part of us that is holding us hostage to the past or repeating the patterns of the past.
Exactly.
Yeah. This has been so good. We could obviously go on for another hour, but to honor your time, we're going to end this conversation here. But before you go, I'd like to ask you what you most cherish about being a woman and where we
Hmm.
can find you online.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Being a woman is like the best thing ever. Where do I begin? I think just, and I've never been a man, so I don't know if they like have this and like just it's a different thing, but just like our wombs, whether or not we have a physical womb anymore, whether, but just like, oh, just like the intuition of our bodies and just the creator cauldron within us, like,
Yeah.
oh, like we're just so like luscious and radiant. Like I just love women. Like we're just so amazing. And so I think for me, just that deep intuition and yeah, so I would say that for sure for me.
Love
And
it.
where I could be found online, the best place is my website, gardenrestored.co. I, like I mentioned, I kind of rebranded even though I shouldn't have, so my Instagram handle is not what it will be, but right now it is The Identity Alchemist, which is a banging brand name but not a right fit for me. But yes, gardenrestored.co is the best place to find me, and you'll have all the up-to-date socials on there.
Cool. Cool. I'll put the links in the show notes, and I'm
Perfect.
sure
Thanks.
that you'll
Love.
give me everything that I need for
Yes, you will.
that.
Yes,
This
yes,
has
I
been
will.
this has been amazing, Edie. Thank you so much for your time. I
Likewise.
appreciate it, and it was so good to connect. And I truly
Thanks.
pray that this
Likewise.
conversation will bless
Yes, yes.
women listening to it.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.